So what is a conceptual model? So a conceptual model, according to Johnson and Henderson, is defined as a high-level description of how a system is organized and operates. And also, it enables designers to strengthen out their thinking before they start laying out their widgets. So basically, before we proceed to what is conceptual model, it is important that you know the difference between the double diamond of design and a conceptual model. Again, the double diamond of design is a type of strategic model, meaning it is a guide. It helps us plot out our overall design process. So it helps with the design process. While the conceptual model, it helps us determine how we're going to create our own product or how we're going to design our own interactive product. For example, how would the users interact with it? How would it be designed? So it helps us to solidify how we're going to convey the idea to our would-be clients or users. Again, ang double diamond of design, we use it as a map or as a guide do sa overall process na kailangan natin sa pagde-design. Pero yung conceptual model, conceptual or konsepto, siya yung kailangan natin para naman mabuo natin kung paano siya gagamitin ng mga tao, para mai-layout natin or ma-explain natin sa kanila kung paano gagamitin yung system natin. So, we use different conceptual models as a guide. However, we'd only discuss 3 conceptual models based on our book or reference book that we are using. The first conceptual model would be using assumption and claims plus framework to back up or to solidify the validity of your design. Next is the use of interface metaphor, and then the last would be the different interaction types. So now that you know what is conceptual model, it has also components. So what are the components inside the conceptual model? A conceptual model might contain metaphors and analogies. So that is one of the components of that. Understand what a product is for and how they use it for an activity. So that part or that component of conceptual model helps the users or also helps the designers to explain what your particular interactive design product does. Also, concept that people are exposed to through the product. So we have task, domain objects, their attributes, and operations, for example. Now, relationship and mappings between those two concepts. First, steps in formulating a conceptual model. So, this is just a suggestion. So, to ask yourself, what will be the users be doing when carrying out their task? So, you must imagine how they would use your design. Next is, how will the system support this? So, how could I back up a design? For example, I wanted to create a touchscreen smartphone or phone. Will the system that I create or I am planning to use can support the type of interface or interaction type that I want? Next is, what kind of interface metaphor, if any, kung gagamit ka man nun, will be appropriate? And then, what kinds of interaction modes and styles to use? So, always keep in mind that when making design decisions, how the user will understand the underlying conceptual model. So, there are many kinds and ways in classifying them, as just what I have stated before. However, the best conceptual models are often that those appear obvious and simple. The operations they support are already intuitive to use or madali siyang matutunan. So, interface metaphor. So, interfaces are designed to be similar to a physical entity but also has its own properties. For example, the desktop metaphor and the web portals can be based on an activity, object, or a combination of both. Now, the word itself, interface, it refers to the visual. And metaphor class, you have studied that. So, we have metaphor, hyperbole, simile. So, metaphor, when we say metaphor, we use it or we use another word or term to convey it to our other clients or other people that we are speaking to if they do not understand the concept. Or you want to present something in a different with a different word or object. Example would be, how are you going to explain to your grandmother how the exchange of email works? Kasi she really is not that techy and you want her to learn how it works so she could contact your aunts abroad. Ngayon is you're going to use a metaphor, and that metaphor that you're going to use would be the use of written letters that we send to the post office. So sasabihin mo sa kanya, Lola, yung email na ito yung parang sinesend natin na written letters sa mga loved ones natin. Ang pinagkaiba lang po is yung parang, ang pinagkaiba lang niya is mabilis siya, paperless siya, and then marireceive agad nung pagpapadalan basta may internet ka. So, ganun siya. Mas pinabilis na way ng written letters. And you don't have to write it. You just have to type it. And then by that, maintindihan na ng lola mo na, ito na pala yung parang written letter nung araw. So, that is an example of metaphor. Bakit kailangan natin ng metaphor? Or why is metaphor interface very crucial when designing a product or when designing a good HCI product? Kasi class, again, I'll be referring to IT softwares and systems. If you were to design an application, a game, a software, or a system, how do you think your would-be users and clients will be able to analyze or to know how to use it? Especially if this is the first time that you're going to use it. Ma'am, we could provide a manual. However, that is not enough, class. Again, if your system is so hard to use, then even no matter how comprehensive your manual is, it would still be considered as a bad design. Why? Because the interface is hard to understand. Sabi nga natin, that madali siyang matutunan para hindi siya nakaka-frustrate. Especially if yung design or yung system na ginawa mo is for daily use or for regular use. So, kailan madali siyang maintindihan ni users. That's why we use interface metaphor. So, I'll give you an example of an interface or desktop metaphor, class. Now, the desktop metaphor, so a great example of that would be the recycle bin that can be found in your desktops or laptops. Now, the recycle bin, class, it is similar to the trash can that we have. So, ang metaphor nun is, yung parang naging metaphor, paano ko may explain na itong icon na to, ang ginagawa niya is dito dinadala or dinadrag yung mga files na gusto nating i-delete. So, ang pinaka-explanation dun, class, is ginaya niya yung trash can kasi doon natin tinatapon yung mga bagay na di natin kailangan or yung mga basura or ayaw na natin. So, pag nakita mo yon, alam mo na, siguro dito nilalagay yung mga bagay na gusto nating i-delete or itapon. So, nakita nyo yung similarity. Gumamit sila ng similar na bagay na nag-i-exist sa physical world and then in-apply nila yung illustration or drawing sa loob ng ating desktop or computer. So, the same goes with our icons that we use. And those are called desktop metaphor. For example, yung icon na magnifying glass, kadalasan, ang meaning nun or definition nun is to search. And meron nga tayong pinag-aaralan, diba, na consistency. So, yung consistency na yun, class, or consistency metaphor, yung consistency metaphor na sinasabi natin, class, is dun pumapasok yung across all devices and different platforms, universal siyang ginagamit. So, yung mga icon designs natin, maaaring ma-alter lang ng bahagya or ng konti, pero universally, ganun yung itsura niya across different types of platforms. So, yun. And also, interface metaphor exploits the user's familiar language. So, again, let me go back to the icons. In later chapters, we're going to discuss different types of interfaces. And then, also, icons, we have different types of icons. Kaya, so sa ngayon, at least is na i-present natin how it is being utilized and what is interface metaphor in particular. So, examples of interface metaphor, conceptualizing what users are doing. For instance, surfing the web. So, hindi lang pala siya sa itsura or representation. It also makes a conceptualization of how we do it. For example, si Shopee. So, si Shopee, inimitate niya how you're going to shop inside a grocery store. So, pag nag-shopping ka, diba, sa isang mall or sa grocery store, ang ginagawa mo is you get a push cart and then you put all the items that you want. You go to the aisle kung nasa nakakategorize yung hahanapin mo na item. And then you put it again in your push cart. And then pagka naisip mo na nag-exceed ka na sa budget mo, pwede mo silang ibalik, right? So, remove it in your push cart and then pagbabayaran mo na, pupunta ka na sa cashier. So, si cashier, pwede ka magbayad ng cash, credit card, debit card, or other modes of payment, online banking, depende sa tinatanggap nila. Pero laging consistent is cash and using your card. Then ngayon class, paano naman siya, ano pinagkaiba niya sa Shopee transaction? Actually, most shopping website does this. So, yun yung naging success nila. Kaya sila, from the early 2000 dito, hindi ganong pinapansin. Bigla nag-boom yung mga paggamit ng online shops or mga like Shopee. Ngayon sa Shopee, ganun din. So, meron kang icon na add to cart. So, doon nakikita nyo ba yung metaphor doon? Yung idea behind doon? Doon sa may process na yon. Ngayon, class, is yung metaphor doon would be you're going to use a push cart. You click the push cart icon and then you add all the items that you want to buy. Now, when you think it's time to cash it in, you click cash in. And then you'll see the delivery fee and then you can choose your mode of payment. COD, cash on delivery. So, parang cash din pag nagbabayad ka dun sa cashier. Or, pwede kang gumamit ng debit, credit card, or online banking or online mode of payment like Shopee Pay. So, that is the metaphor. So, para madaling matutunan or madaling manavigate ni user by using familiar methods or familiar illustrations. So, yun yung metaphor, yun yung interface metaphor. Now, the very popular variation of interface metaphor would be the card metaphor. The card metaphor is the default design that we're using or the default design that we use on our smartphones. It's compact. The other icons or underlying icons are already presented in a way where it would avoid too much information overload. So, yun na explanation doon. Next interface class would be, I'll just keep the benefits and the problems. So, it's up to you to read that. Next would be the interaction types. So, interaction type class, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, it refers to how we interact or how we use the different types of hardwares, softwares, or systems designed by HCI designers. Now, again, I'll relate it with IT-related materials or devices, gadgets. Now, instructing, it refers to issuing commands and selecting options. So, most of the command that we use when instructing would be command line based type. Now, when we say instructing, issuing commands, selecting options, example of that would be programming inside a compiler or software compiler. So, that is an example of instructing. So, you instruct the computer what to do. You type all the codes or the command. Or accessing your computer using shortcut key. So, that is an example of instructing also. Conversing naman, how we interact with it, sometimes class they tend to overlap. So, pag sinabi natin pwedeng, like sa smartphone natin, pwede instructing, conversing, manipulating, exploring, and responding. So, when we say conversing, most of the mode of that, we have two ways of conversing kasi class, according to this. First is through type conversation, like the use of Facebook chatbots. Ayan, yun yung how we interact with that through conversation. Or either the use of voice command or voice interfaces like Siri or Alexa. And when we say manipulating naman, we can change the physical object or manipulate it, like augmented reality. So, where it combines the physical and the virtual world. And then the next class would be another example under manipulating would be Photoshop. You can manipulate a digital photo, you can alter its color, you can add textures, and so on. So those are how we manipulate or we use it. Next is exploring. Example of that would be the use of virtual reality, in which you explore a completely different virtual world. And then the other one would be responding. The system initiates the interaction and the user chooses whether to respond. So, responding then is like Siri or your smartwatch, in which parang nagkakaroon ng exchange of communication between the human and the computer. So again, those interactions type, they tend to overlap sometimes. Like for example, our smartphone, we can, meron siyang function na instructing, conversing, manipulating, exploring, and responding all in one. So saan pumapasok si manipulating? Yung direct manipulation, we can directly manipulate our smartphones through the use of touchscreen. We can directly interact with it, right? Next is conversing. Meron tayong voice command sa ating smartphone. Depending on what smartphone that you use, it still has a voice command inside. And then we have manipulating. You can manipulate your smartphone, or you can install a augmented reality types of application. And a very popular type of augmented reality application class would be Pokemon Go. And then exploring. So you can also link or adjust it to your virtual reality, or you could enter a completely different dimension using an app installed on your smartphone. So that is exploring. And your smartphone could also remind you. You could add a widget that will enable you to change responses with each other or correspondence. So that's all when it comes to interaction type. So it is important to know interface metaphor and interaction type so that you'll know, or you could choose what type of interaction or what type of interface that you're going to use to introduce your system, how it works. Kasi sabi nga natin, kailan madali siyang matutunan, especially if you want your system for commercial use. So that would be all class for chapter 2. So it is just a shortcut or summarized explanation on that. I have included an updated PowerPoint presentation in which it will have your reviewer. This will serve as your reviewer for our upcoming quizzes and exams.